Now, we're going to begin today's little tale by starting with Mr. Meriwether Lewis. Now, he was born in 1774 near Charlottesville, Virginia. And this was in a world where plantations were all around and there was revolutionary ideals being thrown out. Oh, and then guess what? An entire whole war gets fought. And Meriwether's father, he actually ended up passing away very, very young, and his mother remarried. Now, Lewis, he grew up just roaming around in the woods, the fields. He was learning plants and animals, medicines. He had a very restless nature. He was very brilliant and he was very solitary. He was kind of the quiet kid. He didn't mind being alone out in the woods for great deals of time, just doing his thing. Now, he would later serve as Thomas Jefferson's personal secretary, and this is a role that gave him very close proximity to people of power, and it exposed his mind to a different type of ambition than he had ever seen before. But he was not at all a polished aristocrat. He was very much a frontier man with a frontier mind, and he was just living in an Eastern body. Now, that's a good overview of him. Let's move on to Mr. William Clark. Now, William Clark, he was actually born 4 years earlier in the year of 1770 in Caroline County, Virginia. Now, unlike Lewis, he was very gregarious. He was rather practical. He was very steady. He was the younger brother of George Rogers Clark, who was actually a Revolutionary War hero. And William had learned leadership very early. He was very, very adept at surveying, military command. He knew very well how to keep men alive. And he and Lewis actually met as young officers in the U.S. Army. They were opposites, but they were very compatible, kind of a my weaknesses are your strengths type of thing. Now, where Lewis burned inward, it was Clark who anchored outward. They were very, very good together, and they balanced each other quite a bit. Now, let's talk about Sacagawea. Now, she was born around 1788, and her birthplace was not a colony nor a state. It was a homeland. She was of the Shoshone tribe, and she was born near present-day Idaho. And this was a world that was shaped by rivers, horses, and really seasonal movement. Her people knew the mountains very well. They knew the passes, they knew where survival lived, and as a child, Sacagawea, she was actually captured during a raid by a Hidatsa war party, and she was taken hundreds of miles east to villages that are close to modern-day North Dakota. Now, she was separated from her family almost immediately. She was separated from her language and the name that she was given at birth as she had known it. Now, eventually, she was actually claimed by a French-Canadian trapper named Toussaint Charbonneau. I'm sure I'm saying that very wrong. I always say I do the Oklahoma versions, but Toussaint Charbonneau. She was still a teenager at the time. Her life narrowed greatly, and then unexpectedly, it widened yet again because in 1803, we all know that the year of 1803, Thomas Jefferson finalized the Louisiana Purchase. Now, on paper, the land belonged to the United States, but in reality, it belonged to no one that Jefferson or anybody else had any control over. Now, at this time, Jefferson is like, we need some knowledge. We need a path to the Pacific, a catalog of the rivers. We need to know the plants, the tribes, and as a result of all of these needs, he chose Meriwether Lewis, and Lewis chose William Clark. Now, together, this very compatible little duo, they assembled the Corps of Discovery, and they would leave from St. Louis in 1804. They had boats, they had weapons, they had no guide for the continent ahead, but that all changed one winter later. So in the winter of 1804, the expedition camped among the Hidatsa villages. Now, this is where Lewis and Clark met Sacagawea, and at this time, she was pregnant. Now, she spoke fluent Shoshone and Hidatsa, and her husband, old Toussaint Charbonneau, he spoke fluent French because that's where he grew up. So, through this like long chain of translations, she actually could kind of bridge the worlds together. Now, Lewis and Clark actually hired Charbonneau as their interpreter, but what they truly got out of that particular employment opportunity is they got Sacagawea as yet another companion on this little adventure. So in February 1805, she actually gives birth to their son and they named him Jean Baptiste. Now, Clark, for some reason, called him Pomp. And weeks later, she actually took that sweet little baby boy that she just gave birth to, and she carried that little infant directly into the unknown world that lay ahead them. Now, Sacagawea, she was not just this translator, she was also used as a signal. And I hate to say used because she's a human being, but she was a signal because a war party does not travel with a woman and a child. And so they looked significantly less threatening to anybody that saw them from a distance or that they went to approach because, it's just a mother and her baby and these two guys that are just bebopping along and nobody knows where they're headed. So let's find out. But what I'm really getting at is that her presence told tribes ahead that this was not an invading force or anybody to be afraid of. She also was very good at recognizing certain landmarks. She remembered a lot of the river bends and she named a lot of the plants. She knew basically every single inch of the territory around them. I'm sure there were times where she was like, I don't know, this doesn't look very familiar, but maybe not. I mean, maybe she was that good. I am not so good with directions, so I don't think I would have made it for very long in this particular time period. I don't think I would do very well in like any time before Apple Maps, but whatever.